You are live.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of July the 21st, 2020. At this time, I'd like to introduce our recording secretary, Jen Chavez. Jen?
Hi, thank you. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining tonight. Prior to roll call, City Attorney would like to make an announcement to the Planning Commission regarding the teleconferencing of this meeting. And with that, I will turn it over to the Assistant City Attorney, Alicia Poon.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jen. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. The executive orders authorize this planning commission to hold public meetings by teleconference during the COVID-19 crisis. I previously went over specific provisions of the Brown Act that have been temporarily amended or suspended in order to allow for this meeting to take place by teleconference, and this meeting will comply with all such provisions. Madam Recording Secretary, it would now be appropriate for you to conduct roll call, after which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, roll call. Commissioner Frank?
Present.
Commissioner Kuznick?
Here.
Commissioner Marks?
Here.
Vice Chair Wallace?
I'm here.
Chair Alpert?
Here.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jen. Alicia, you may now go ahead with the confirming matters for the record.
Thank you, Chair Alpert. I would now like to ask the chair, the vice chair, and the other commission members 3 questions. Rather than ask you to respond separately to these questions, I'll ask all 3, and if the answer is no to any one of them, please indicate by physically raising your hand. First question, can you hear me well? Second question, have you been able to hear our proceedings up until now? And third and final question, were you able to hear all of your fellow commissioners clearly as they responded to roll call? If any of these are no, please indicate by raising your hand. And seeing no hands raised, the record should reflect that all commission members have indicated they are able to hear each other and that they can hear the proceedings clearly. I would next request that any commission members speak up at this time if you have any reason to believe that anyone representing themselves to be a planning commissioner is not who they say they are. Hearing no comment, the record should reflect that no commission member has expressed doubt that each and every commission member participating by teleconference is in fact the commission member they are representing themselves to be. And finally, I would like to advise the chair and the commission members and the recording secretary that any votes taken during this teleconference portion of the meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. At this time, I'd like to ask our recording secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Alicia.
Okay, item 4 is public comments or written communication. If you wish to speak under public comment or regarding a specific agenda item, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak when public comment is being taken. You will then be unmuted when it's your turn to make your comment for up to 3 minutes. After the allotted time, you will then be remuted. At this time, those who wish to address the Planning Commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda may do so. So we'll give it a little bit of time here. If anyone would like to speak, please feel free to raise your hand. All right, Chair Alpert, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we can go ahead and move on if you'd like.
Okay, I'm not seeing any either. Again, raise your hand if you don't. I'm not seeing any. Okay, at this time, I'll go ahead and close public comment and we can go ahead and move on to the next item.
Thank you. Item 5, additions and revisions. We have none tonight. Item 6 is consent calendar. We have none. And item 7 is approval of minutes. Item 7.1, minutes from the July 7th, 2020 regular Planning Commission meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have any changes, corrections, updates to the minutes from our July 7th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting? Seeing no indication of army, I have a motion to accept and approve the minutes as written. Raise your
I'll move
hand.
to approve the minutes of the July 7, 2020 meeting of the Planning Commission.
Okay, it's been moved by Vice Chair Wallace. May we have a second, please?
I will second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Kuznick.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. We'll start with mover, Vice Chair Wallace,
Aye.
seconder, Commissioner Kuznick,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank,
Abstain.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
and Chair Alpert.
Aye.
All right. Item 7.1 passes. Thank you. Item 8 is continued items after closing of public hearing. We have none tonight. Item 9, continued items, open public hearing. Item 9.1, Russian School of Mathematics. Staff report presented by Shinier Sukumoto, Associate Planner.
Good evening, Chair Alpert, and a member of the commission and a member of the public as well as staff. I see your name in attendees. And I also recognize the applicant and the property owner for this project. The subject before you is a land use permit application to establish a specialized education training school for up to 94 students in the K to 12 grades at any given time between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Saturday and Sunday at an existing tenant space of 3,800 square feet. And they're proposing to create 9 classrooms to operate this mathematics enrichment program. And on March 3rd, the commission reviewed this application. And before you making the action, you requested the applicant to provide either the parking demand analysis or have all the parking spaces at the Outcaster Professional Plaza restriped, and then come back to demonstrate that there will be sufficient parking spaces for the proposed specialized education training school. In response, the property owner restriped the parking lot on lot E or lot 5 in June, and then they came back to say that there are 178 parking spaces on the property, while 168 spaces are required for the existing and proposed uses. So that's how we came back before you. And with that, I would like to, through the chair, I'd like to have the property owner speak for this application. And Mr. Raj Patel.
I don't know if you can hear me. Hi, my name is Raj Patel. I'm the owner of the property, the subject property, and the application by the tenant. Firstly, I would like to thank everybody on the planning side for assisting us to get to the stage. And as mentioned, it's probably been the longest application process that I've experienced. But we have just for the record, we have now managed to complete all the parking requirements by restriping and concluded all the long histrionic issues that went with the association. And now all the association has finished the required parking in terms of their CCNR and their jurisdiction on the lot. So as far as the requirements from the Planning Commission from the March 3rd meeting, we seem to be fully compliant in terms of the parking requirements. I would like to draw a little bit of attention to a few things that have been challenging over the period where there's been, representation, etc., by people that are not really authorized. But just to let the commission also know that everything is under the full control of the association, and we are working quite well with the association. Unlike whatever was misguided, the person misguiding the commissioners in the March 3rd meeting. But saying that, I want to thank everybody, and I'm here if there's any questions relating to the ownership of the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Through the chair, I would like to also add that there are 4 late communications. 2 of them came from the residents, Mrs. Diane Winkler, and the second one is Mrs. Wilma Shannon. And the 2 other late communications are from the property owners, just for the record. Thank you.
Okay. And we did all receive those in our, emailed to us this afternoon, and all of the commissioners did receive them this afternoon, and I'm seeing indications that we did. So thank you. Thank you, Shinier. Okay. Are there other either applicants or property owners that wish to speak, Shinier, tonight? I see a few others that have been promoted to the screen.
At this time, unless you have any questions to the applicant specifically or staff, I think we don't need to have the applicant, because this is more of the property management issue
Okay.
than the land use itself.
Okay. Well, then maybe what I'll do first is I'll go ahead and open the public comment. If we have any public comment first, and then we'll turn it over to the commission to ask any questions that we might have, either the applicant or the property owners. So, Jen, do we have anybody that wishes to speak at this time?
So did you want to start with, I could go over all of the written communication real quick if you'd like. We could start there.
Please, right.
Okay.
And let's remind people of the process to follow if they wish to speak, and then
Okay.
we can do the written comment while we remind people to get their buttons pushed to raise their hand.
Sure. So prior to taking public comment from the audience, as a reminder, if you do wish to speak on this item, you can press *9 on your telephone, or you can select the raise your hand button on your computer. But we're going to take just a moment here to acknowledge that we did receive several late communication items for this item. And as Shinier pointed out, we did receive one from Raj Patel of Concord Hospitality Partners, LLC. And he was referencing comments made at the March 3rd Planning Commission meeting. We also received a late communication item from Diane Winkler and Ray DeWert stating concerns with safety, noise, and congestion. Another from Darshan Patel on behalf of Outcaster Professional Association, confirming that the restriping of the parking lot had been completed and is in compliance with the property maintenance agreement. And then lastly, from Wilma Shannon, voicing concerns with safety, noise, traffic congestion, and other environmental impacts on those who live in the Sunny Glen Senior Residential Community. So those were the items we received. And all of these were provided to the Planning Commission prior to the meeting. We could go ahead and open it up now for public comment from the audience. It looks like we have a couple people who would like to speak. So I will go ahead and start at the top here. We have John Richards. And John, you should be able to speak.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. I'm John Richards. I sent a communication for public comment at 5:09 p.m. It said the deadline was 6. I don't know. I guess it didn't go through. Regardless, my name is John Richards. I'm an attorney a real estate attorney based out of Danville, and I represent the actual owner of Lot 5 that's subject to this application. It's the estate of Jerry Kalar. So one of the things that's I'd like to strongly urge the commission not to accept or not to deny this application. The property owner, Mr. Patel, actually doesn't own lot 5. The estate of Jerry Kalar does. And Mr. Kalar recently passed away, and he's been infirm, as I understand it, since February. So he has been unable to act on his own behalf. But the property and Mr. Patel are subject to a lawsuit for trespass and possibly elder abuse. And that's going to be my job to institute this lawsuit. I sent an email about this, but I guess the fallacy is that the Concord hospitality owners don't own lot 5. They don't have any easement rights over it. And they don't have, any right to use the property in the way that they're saying. On page 9 of the packet that you provided to the public, it states that Concord hospitality owners are the owner of all the properties stated on that page, and that's wrong. Page 10 shows Concord hospitality owners proposes making property on the property that they, again, don't own. On the maps on page 12, the property on the far right, you can see it delineated on that page. I wish I could post it up there for you to see, but it kind of looks like a sideways hourglass. That's the property that's owned by the estate of Jerry Kalar. Anyway, and then on page 14 and 15, there are 2 therein that, again, Mr. Kalar and his estate strongly disagree with. They don't agree that this is compatible with the existing or even the future use of this property, which they've been trying to develop. And it's essentially a taking. And putting parking there will both change the density and materially alter the value of the lot. They were marketing it recently within a year. I know I'm on a three-minute time limit, but for $1.8 million, and as a parking lot that has no income or revenue, it'll be worth essentially nothing. It'll be a liability that owes taxes.
Okay, so that was your 3-minute time. If you want to just wrap it up, you can, if you have just a moment more.
Okay, well, that really is essentially it. It just, obviously the loss in value is a dramatic issue, dramatic loss. It's 1.8 million possibly versus 0. Mr. Patel knows all this. He knows about the ownership here. This is not a secret to him. So we also should have Bruce Baldwin on the line to speak, but he's the real estate agent that was marketing the property. I'm going to wrap it up in like 10 seconds. And can speak to the loss in value as a result of what's gone on here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
speaking. Okay.
Okay, so I do see Bruce here. I'll go ahead and allow him to talk. He'll also have 3 minutes. Hi, Bruce.
He's on mute.
I know it's,
Okay.
I think he has to do it from his side.
Got it.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Bruce.
Okay. Hi, go ahead.
Bruce Baldwin. I've been a broker in San Ramon since 1978. And Jerry Kalar, I had that property listed until he passed a few months ago, and had it marketing at 1.8 million. Had a number of developers interested in the property. It was difficult because of the lack of parking that was available. And so with this proposed additional parking over the entire lot, it would make a material injury to the property, bring the value down to really nothing. I was shocked just a few weeks ago. I went out to the property and I saw that it was repaved entirely and striped by someone I don't know who does not own the property, was not given permission to do that because, of course, Jerry has passed and it's in his estate now. And I know the estate did not give anyone permission to do that paving and striping of his lot. So the state has hired J.R. Richards, who we just heard from. and he will be taking action as far as trespass and filing a lawsuit for the people that are attempting to take over his property and not offer any compensation to him or his estate. And that's really all I have to say at this point, unless you have questions.
Can I raise my hand? I can't raise my hand on here, but if you could let me speak whenever possible.
Okay, we'll hold off for 1 second, please. Okay, is that it, Mr. Baldwin? That's
Yeah, that's about it, unless you have any
Okay.
questions about the lot. I know quite a bit about it. I've
okay.
spoke
Okay,
to a
no.
lot of investors
Okay,
concerning the property.
I think we're okay for now, but thank you for coming out, and just stay tuned. We may have questions, but we'll go ahead and close that for now.
You're-
Okay. Are there any other public comments at this time, Jen?
No, you know what? One hand just went up. I can go ahead and allow them to talk. I can't pronounce their name. So when I allow you to talk, go ahead and just state your name for the record.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hi,
can.
yes, we can.
My name is John Ichiyuji. I am I'm a dentist and property owner at the property 9260 Alcasta. I own building D. I'm actually the manager of the homeowners association for an on-site manager. I'm finding it interesting, some of the comments being made. First of all, Mr. Kalar, we're sorry of his passing. We were never informed of his situation. We tried to make communication with whoever was in charge, and that was at one time represented by Mrs. Kalar and a gentleman, apparently her husband, Tim Hall. And the response I got in writing was that he would pass our interest to find out who the owner was onto the owner, and it would be up to the owner to contact us. We were never advised that he had passed away voluntarily. The property has been part of the homeowners association for as long as I've owned the property in 1996. Mr. and Mrs. Kalar both owned the majority property, building C, B, and lot E. And they were very familiar, part of the homeowners associations. They had read when they bought the property, the CCNRs, which clearly states that that lot was used as parking and part of the homeowners association's responsibility to maintain it, including striping, cleaning, and keeping it in order for the proper use permit. It's surprising because on the March 3rd meeting, Mrs. Kalar had received a conditional use permit for her Kumon school based on the improvement of the parking lot. And when their comments were made that we were unwilling to improve the lot, bring it up to code, she was and her now husband, Tim Hall, were instrumental in preventing that and including this threat of lawsuit, where it clearly states in there. And I believe this is vindictive because we will not change our CCNRs to allow overnight parking. And without that, the value of the lot to turn it into residential decreases. The value of the lot I dispute because it's always been allowed to be built on within the realm of the code of the city. And at one time it was actually in contract with Viacom to build buildings there back in the late 90s. Like I said, I've been there since 1982. So
You have about 10 seconds left. I just want to give you a heads up.
I just wanted to clarify that the homeowners association has been trying to work with the owners. They've been intentionally vague as far as who the contact person are. And so if Mr. Richards would disclose who his client is, we would gladly like to work with them.
Great. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Chair Alpert, I do have, it looks like Bruce and John both have their hands up. I don't know what the policy is. If do
Right. We just have the one
Okay.
one per. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do have another speaker, Tim Hall.
Tim Hall.
So I will go ahead. I can put Tim Hall on here, and I'll allow you to speak. Hi, Tim, can you hear us? Still waiting.
Tell Tim he's on mute.
Yeah.
Hi, Tim. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to talk. Okay.
Okay. Well, we can
All
come
right,
back
so
to you,
we
Mr.
can-
Hall,
we
but
can come back to
yeah.
him.
Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
there he goes. Okay. Hi, go ahead.
Hi, Tim. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I don't know, maybe he raised his hand by accident. We can come back to him.
Mhm.
Like,
Okay.
okay,
Give it just a few seconds. I'm sure he wanted to speak, so we'll come back.
sure.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
I have
Darshan Patel.
Darshan.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hi.
can.
Yep.
Yeah, so my name is Darshan Patel. I'm the association president. I just wanted to reiterate a few items which I know have been mentioned and the Planning Commission is aware of. All 5 parcels within the Alcasta Professional Plaza fall under the maintenance agreement within the CCNRs, which, as John previously mentioned, is recorded and dates back to 1988. The parking requirements fulfill not just our building C's requirements, but all other buildings within the complex. So the 178 spaces doesn't directly only benefit us, it benefits everyone in the complex. Building B, A, C, D, all of which have on their own, within their own boundaries, do not have the required number of spaces. Therefore, the entire complex with all 5 lots encompasses the 178 required spaces. And this has been mentioned previously in the 2016 staff report for Kumon. And of course, in the March 3rd request by the city to fulfill, restriping and maintaining the lot. The association with the majority vote went ahead and restriped the lot. It was field verified by the city engineering department and was completed in order for us to bring back our applicant's application to the city. That's all I have right now. Yes, I'm open to questions if there is any.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And once again, you are the president of the HOA, is that correct?
Correct. I am the association president and a co-owner within Building C.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we want to see if Mr. Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me go ahead. I will allow Tim to talk.
Okay, Mr. Hall, do you want to?
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Yes, the CCNRs are not in, the CCNRs don't really play a part when the city has that set up as a senior overlay, which is designed to have senior housing put on that property. The CCNRs are trying to stop what the city is requesting by not allowing them to have overnight any residential there. There's a big conflict here with the CCNRs and what the city is requesting for that lot to do as far as we're supposed to be doing with that lot. And that is what we're trying to fulfill, is what the city is asking us to do. By doing this school, it crushes what the senior overlay is designed for that corner. And as far as that property not being developed, it was always going to be developed. The city of San Ramon had it in contract. They were buying it at one time. That fell out because of the economy, and the city of San Ramon had to back out of that. There's a long history to this property, and to go ahead and, just deem it a parking lot when we were told by Ryan Driscoll that this was not going to happen, that it had to be senior housing. It contradicts the CCNRs. The CCNRs need to be revised as far as what the city told me, because the city overrules the CCNRs. That's about all I have to say right now in
Okay,
regards.
great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I
Okay,
don't see any other speakers. So we could probably move on at this point unless
Okay.
you'd like to give it.
Nope. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time.
Can I make one comment?
Okay, as the applicant,
Hello,
I guess.
can I do a comment? I can't, like, somehow my technology is not working. I can't raise my hand.
Yeah, as the applicant, I'll give you one last chance to, you're the applicant, so I'll go ahead and give you one last chance to speak. Certainly.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, councillors. I just want to ensure that there is no clouding of this whole issue. Just to be very clear, as of today, we have already confirmed with the Superior Court at the Superior Probate Court that the lot 5, Mr. Richards himself does not represent, even though he's a lawyer, he does not represent the lot. He's not authorized by letters of administration from the Superior Court, Probate Court. Neither is Mr. Baldwin authorized to represent lot 5. That's just for knowledge. Okay.
Okay.
Number 2 is Mr. Tim Hall, again, is confusing senior housing, and nobody has said that his lot, that lot 5 cannot be developed, and nobody has talked about it being that the association is blocking the development. Senior housing can be developed on the lot, but it is all what do you call it? It is all controlled by the CCNR and the bylaws of the association, which prohibit residential. And from my knowledge, and when we bought the property too, we had legal opinion of that, is that there is no issue as long as the association blocks residential, which is not discriminatory, there is no issue, right? And he keeps on talking about senior housing overlay. That is not the point. And this application has nothing to do with redevelopment of lot 5. This application is simply an application for one of our tenants and the provision of parking, which has been there for 30 years. Nobody's made anything about it for 30 years. And now suddenly all these guys come up and they have an interest in this lot of somebody who has passed away and it is in their estate. So I just wanted to have that as a proof. And, that's just my my input at the moment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And Shinier, any last comments before we turn it over to the commission?
No, there isn't any comment from staff, but the staff is recommending the adopting the resolution.
Okay. Let me open it up to the commission for, first of all, for any questions for discussion at this point. I'm certain that there's some questions or some discussion. And I can probably see Commissioner Wallace looks like you're just dying to ask some questions.
Actually, I do, and they're not directed to Shanae. They're actually directed to Ms. Poon.
I thought that's who you might want to ask questions of.
Okay, so I remember to a certain extent the application when it came before us the last time and maybe the time before that too. It is my recollection that there are shared parking agreements among all the lot owners. That's my understanding. My question actually to Ms. Poon is this. Let's suppose that we grant the use permit. If in the future, the owner of lot 5 or lot E, I can't remember which one it's gone by, is able to obtain an order from the court precluding the use of that property for parking for the benefit of the other landowners, what then happens to the use permit that's been granted predicated upon the use of parking on that particular lot?
There would, well, it's one of the conditions, I think, to have appropriate parking. And so you would have to revisit the permit back at the commission for lack of the sufficient parking. So I think they'd have a hearing about revoking the permit if they can't resolve the lack of parking issue.
Okay. So there is technically, obviously, a dispute between the association, the applicant, and what may or may not be the representative for owner 5, lot 5. Do you have an opinion about whether we should go ahead and proceed with the permit application, given that the property is currently striped and meets our parking requirements, and then leave it to future actions to decide whether that permit needs to be revisited?
Yeah, our goal here is to look at the appropriateness of the land use, ownership, or the inner struggles between the association and the different property owners are all civil matters that they need to sort out themselves. As you know, associations have CC&Rs. Those are contracts amongst the owners, not something that the city gets involved with. So the enforcement of it, or prosecuting one property owner having a cause of action against another would all be private civil matters that they would have to work out themselves, as well as who the proper owner is, or if someone's affirming they are the proper owner, but they are not, that would all be sorted out in a court of law.
Whenever that's available.
Mhm.
So, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Mr. Kuznick.
Okay, thank you. So in the use permit, at least as I read it, it specifies the hours to be afternoon of the weekdays and then daytime on the weekends. So I guess the question is, if we approve this and if they find that this is a more desired business than the anticipation, especially given that schools are physically closed until some future time, would they have to come back and have an amendment to their use permit if they decided that, wow, we really need to have, math availability because there's so many kids home who aren't getting what they need? How would that work?
If they're going to change the hours of operation as spelled out today, or increase the numbers of students to be allowed at any given time within the time frame that is specified, then it has to come back to the city, at least to the zoning administrator to have it reevaluated. And it's possibly amendment to the conditions of approval, or depending on the magnitude, and it could be subject to a new use permit as well too. So depending on how it is going to be changed. But nonetheless, any change to be happened, some changes has to be reviewed before approval.
That's what I thought. Now, if they came back with a request for change because of the hours, would this parking issue come up again? Or once we settle it, it's settled?
Once again, depending on the situation, hours of operation increases, then if that may lead to parking or traffic increase, in our professional opinion, then we may have to look into that.
Okay. That seems very reasonable. So thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Frank, Commissioner Marks, any questions of staff? Yep.
I don't have questions of staff per se. I think the city attorney answered it appropriately. And just to verify, Alicia, there's no pending court order that would enjoin us or prevent the Planning Commission from making a land use decision right now, is there?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. I only had, aside from this sort of late breaking issue, I had a question regarding a condition in the actual resolution, but I don't know if you want to get to that right now, Chair Alpert, or
Let's hold off on that just for a sec. Yeah. Commissioner Marks, did you have any questions of staff at this point? You. Yeah, me.
Sorry about that. I don't have any questions. I agree with the city attorney.
Okay, thank you. I just had one question, Shinier. In our
Yes.
March 3rd staff report, there was a traffic study, and then we did get a late communication where somebody raised a concern about potential conflict with the fire station across the street. And I believe Deborah's on. Could we just confirm, when the traffic study was done, I'm certain I recall that, Furcrest was looked at and the fire station traffic versus the school traffic was also, considered. Could we just ask Deborah to pop on, and there she is, to
Yes.
confirm that, could you just confirm for us that the fire station traffic and the new school traffic were all considered as part of this project together when we looked at traffic?
Yes, everything was considered, the fire station and all the traffic that's existing.
Okay, and thank you for that. And then that was the only question I really had regarding this project at this time. And they can coexist. And I guess they were considered, and they can coexist. They can live together. We're not going to impact the fire station by adding the school traffic, I guess, is the real question. We're not going to negatively impact the ability of the safety and the fire trucks from entering and exiting the fire station. Yeah.
Chair Alpert, it's ironic that you would mention that. I sorry to interrupt, but that's the one issue that I had. I recall at the first meeting that there had been discussion of just having the applicant or the operator of the Russian school in issuing a letter of instructions asking the clients to ingress and egress from the Alcasta entrance as opposed to turning on the Furcrest. And that would avoid any issues at all, because there was an additional, I don't have the traffic study in front of me, but I do recall that folks making turns coming, I guess what would be east on Alcasta and turning right on Furcrest, it would increase, obviously, if that's the way they were going to enter. And it's the same thing with people exiting. There's a fire station there. This is not a necessary entrance or exit for that matter. And I think it would be in keeping with sort of the neighborhood aesthetic, given that we've got Sunny Glen right there also, to just sort of move everybody down to Alcasta to come in and out. And so that was my only comment there, even though, and I think the applicant had no problem with that.
Okay.
I remember.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Deborah. Yeah, that was kind of where that's my only comments. We did get a late comment today as well, someone was concerned about safety and the fire station being right there. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, or do we have comments regarding the project at this point?
Yeah, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair Alpert.
And we also, it looks like the applicant also wants to make a statement as well. Commissioner Kuznick.
Since we're dispensing good advice, based on some of the late communication, this might be to the collection of property owners, CCNRs, that there might be some usefulness and goodwill to think about perhaps installing some sort of wall or something more defining the back of this particular lot E, which is up for discussion, that would allow the homeowners that back up to that to feel like you were good neighbors and took their concerns of noise and security to heart, and that you, as being good neighbors, included that at some point in your future upgrades. So I just wanted to toss that in. It's not part of this resolution, but I thought I had this opportunity to speak to being good neighbors and having goodwill. I'm done.
I think the owner of the school wanted to make a comment. Mr. Paley, did you want to actually? I'll let you go ahead and speak for just a minute here. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Alpert and the rest of the commissioners. I just wanted to, kind of reiterate what everything have been said. We appeared in the March 3rd meeting, and at which you guys set the conditions for approving our use permit, and we have successfully implemented the changes with the help of the owners of the homeowner association. And I just want to again address the concerns for safety. We are working with you. We want to make sure everything's safe. We want to make sure that our neighbors are not disturbed. We operate out of 54 locations throughout the United States, and we have extensive operations experiences. We stagger our classes and so decrease the parking, so no more than a couple of classes starts every 10 to 15 minutes. So we're not traditional schools where we have everybody arriving, entire capacity of our school arriving at one time, creating congestions and things like that. So it's a staggered process where we, and again, the majority of our operations come after hours. Again, any concerns that the city has with the traffic patterns and the way we enter the property and the way exit, we'll address those as needed, and make sure that we communicate to our customers that the requirements that imposed by the city for the safety issues. And I'm here to answer any additional questions.
Great, thank you, thank you. Okay, at this time, are we ready to entertain a motion? Any or discussion? Motion, then we can continue with discussions, sir. Oh, Commissioner Marks is speaking, but mute.
Don't say any bad words.
He's back to mute.
Here, I unmuted him. He should be good now.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, I move resolution 04-20 along with all of the proposed conditions of approval.
Okay.
Through the chair, if we might, staff would like to include an additional condition of approval related to the indemnification language that the city does have as a standard condition of approval to indemnify the city if there is a lawsuit filed.
I would consider that a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Okay, discussion? Any discussion?
Yes, I would ask that my fellow commissioners consider adding a language to special condition of approval number 3. This is the condition dealing with the written instructions that I was speaking to, that it includes language that the written instructions include a request for their clients to enter and exit from Russian school mathematics business on the Alcasta entrance and avoid the Furcrest entrance. I know that was really verbose, but I think that hopefully the staff has an idea of what I'm asking for, and I'm seeing if there's an appetite on the commission to have that be part of the condition.
Before we look to the commission, Shinier or Deborah, do you see any concerns with directing all entrance and exit to Alcasta and avoiding Furcrest?
I don't.
No.
And
Okay.
also that was one of the proposals from the applicant to use the parking lot on the east side of the building. So this condition is, I believe it's appropriate. And we have some language that have been used for this kind of occasion. So we can
Okay.
put that in.
Okay, and Mr.
Yep.
Paley,
I have a question with regards to that. I mean, we're not the only tenant at the plaza, and how do we know who's our tenant, who's not? I mean, who's our customer, who's not our customer that entering from that? And it's from the enforcement standpoint of view, we can make sure that our tenants, our students coming in the right way. But how do we enforce the rest of the, if they see other people entering this way, and how do we enforce that from our standpoint of view?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a concern trying to make this particular amendment apply to every tenant. Their permits are not before us tonight. This is about the applicant and limiting their entrance to and exit to Alcosta. So if it's enforceable at all, it's enforceable only through this permit for this particular use, not the entire center.
I had a question for the city engineer on that. It's one thing if you're coming east on Alcosta, say you were on the west side of San Ramon and you came up Alcosta, then it's a right-hand turn into the parking lot. However, if you're coming west on Alcosta, as I recall, there is no way to turn directly into the entrance off of Alcosta because there's a median, as I recall. And so what someone would have to do is they'd have to go to Furcrest and do one of two things. They either have to do a U-turn on Alcosta Boulevard to go up to the Alcosta entrance, or turn down Furcrest and then turn around on Faircrest and then go back to Alcosta to come in the Alcosta entrance. The latter being the problem that gave rise to this question about making people move to the Alcosta entrance, because if they're coming west, west on Alcosta, they're going to basically either have to go down Furcrest, which we're trying to avoid because of the fire station, or do a U-turn on Alcosta, which may not even be legal at that point. So I'd like the city and traffic engineers' comments on the desirability of that particular movement on westbound Alcosta.
So, excuse me, there is room for U-turns at the stop sign at Furcrest and Alcosta. So that's a more viable option than turning down Furcrest and then finding somewhere else to turn around and then come back. I also want to make a point that the traffic study did look at the ingress and egress on Furcrest at that driveway, and it wasn't projecting a lot of traffic coming in and out of there. Most of the traffic would come in and out of the driveway off of Alcosta anyways. But there's ways to maneuver, and if we wanted to restrict it to Alcosta.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Franks, your addition was simply that you were asking the applicant to include a written statement to their clients that this is the preferred entrance and exits. Okay.
That's correct. That's
it's
correct.
not any kind of
no, there's no requirement to release anything. There's no changes in signage. There's none of that. This is just this is merely you'd be meeting the condition if you just provided the letter to your clients. And to be honest with you, I think that especially based on what Ms. Fair said, it sounds like it's not going to really rearrange people's lives anyway if they didn't have a lot of people coming in and out of that. I'm just saying that since you're going to be doing business on that side of Alcosta anyway, it makes little sense to me to increase the load even by one car if we don't have to in such a sensitive area. So that's my point.
I have no problem with putting as a letter to the to their customers. Again, I just was worried about including as a condition for us to maintain and police that it's happening.
No, nobody would be. In fact, it would be perfectly legal if somebody did turn right on Furcrest when they were coming down Alcosta to the east and turn left. There'd be nothing to stop them from doing that. And what I'm contemplating, this is just a management issue, I think, or kind of a programming issue for the Russian school.
No problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, so let me do a quick survey to see if that suggested changes okay among the commissioners. Show of sort of, it's okay? No?
Fine with
No.
me.
Okay, it looks like it's fine. It's fine. Okay, thank you all. Okay, so we got a motion and a second and a change to condition number 3. And Shinier, we'll leave it to you to make the wording. I guess Commissioner Frank didn't like his own wording, but you can come up with slightly better wording.
We can do that.
Okay, any
Sure.
other? Okay,
Confirm that the indemnification conditions being added also?
yes, that is correct. With the indemnification language, and we trust that the city has language that they have that's acceptable, you know, that we don't necessarily need to discuss that, I assume. Yeah. Any other, you know, let's take any other changes with the resolution? Does anybody see anything with the resolution itself? You know, we don't need to go line by line, but before we vote at this point. Okay. I'm not seeing anything on the resolution. Anything on the conditions of approval that anybody saw, with the exception, we've already talked about condition number 3. Okay, I think, Madam Recording Secretary, may we have a go to vote, please?
Sure. Okay, I will start with our mover. We had Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
and I believe it was Vice Chair Wallace who was our seconder.
Yes.
It was an aye.
Thank you. And then we have Commissioner Kuznick,
I,
Commissioner, sorry.
it's okay.
Commissioner Kuznick, we already have Marks and we have Wallace. So we're doing Commissioner Frank.
Aye, as amended.
Thank you. And Chair Alpert.
Aye.
Okay. Item 9.1 passes.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thank-
everybody, and thank you, and good luck with the opening of the school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay. So we'll go ahead. We can move on to item 9.2. 9.2 is Citywalk Master Plan and Draft Environmental Impact Report Response to Comments. Staff report is provided by Lauren Barr, Planning Manager.
Good evening, Chair, Commission members. I'm going to share my screen and go through a PowerPoint presentation. I need to make a statement that the PowerPoint I'm showing tonight is slightly different than the one in your packet. I added some slides related to the intersection improvements, as well as some additional information regarding design guidelines. And so I'll highlight those as we get to them in the presentation. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Hey, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let me find my mouse. Okay, so this is the Citywalk Master Plan in Response to Comments document. What we have is the profile of a master plan that's going to be developed over 27 years. It's 45 multifamily dwelling units, 15% affordable. There's a 169 room hotel. And that was a separate application already approved under the prior entitlements by the Planning Commission. There's a 166,000 square feet of commercial space within the plan area, 3 new parking structures, a shared parking concept, over 40 acres of parks and public spaces. Those are publicly accessible, privately owned. And then there's a series of circulation systems related to pedestrian, bicycle, and also transit hubs being proposed. Likewise, within some of the public spaces, there are some community amenities that are being proposed. And we have a series of applications that relate to this master plan. First is a vesting tentative map, and I'll go over that briefly, but it has the description of how the land will be subdivided. There is a development plan application that relates to the master plan itself. And you have a design application packet that has a lot of details and a diagram of the master plan. Architectural review application, which includes design guidelines. There's a minor use permit for a shared parking concept. And again, land use permit for those community amenities such as amphitheater, lodging use, community buildings. Something I want to emphasize here is that this is the framework for future approvals. Each phase of development requires a site-specific development plan and architectural review application. And so, again, this is more of a framework for future decision-making. So here's the master plan itself. I'm going to use this highlighted mouse to just walk through a few items here just to get your bearings and orientation. So there are 5 neighborhoods. There's one here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. This is parcel 1A, 3A, and then this larger parcel is 2600. This is the existing city center project here that was approved under the original city center entitlements and is now open. In addition, there's a future medical office building here on parcel 1B, which is part of the prior city center approvals invested with development agreements. As part of this concept, these surface parking lots on 2600 are being converted to structured parking. There's an existing parking lot right here on the corner. There'll be an additional one here, here, and here. And then each of the residential structures will have its own parking associated with it. And then there are also roadway networks that are throughout the plan area that are privately owned and maintained. So here's the overview of the vesting tentative map. The packet that was provided to you has a lot more detail of the individual parcels. But again, what we're looking at is dividing up these neighborhoods and creating parcels and that can be financed individually for construction of various aspects of the project. So it's really an organizational tool to help with long-term construction, ownership, and how that's all managed on site. And then you have the large building here that's the existing parcel. So thus far, we have an environmental impact report that's been prepared. That report consists of the draft DIR, the response to comments document with errata, and that was provided in advance of this meeting. And then there's also a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And so I'm going to touch on each of those real quickly, and then we'll talk more about the project. So the draft DIR, which was released on May 19th, includes an analysis of many potential impacts associated with the project. And it also includes ways in which those impacts might be mitigated or avoided. The master plan, the conclusion of the draft EIR was that the master plan would not result in any significant unavoidable impacts as proposed. There was mitigation proposed for many of the topical areas such as air quality, biological, cultural, greenhouse gas hazards, water quality, noise, and transportation. There was a 45-day public review period beginning on May 19th. It concluded on July 2nd. In addition, there was a public hearing that was provided to solicit public comments on June 16th. And then all those comments were forwarded to our consultants to be part of the response to comments document. And again, that's what was provided to you about a week and a half ago. So the comments that were provided relate to numerous topics related to process, aesthetics, traffic, affordable housing, transportation, parks. Again, there's any number of comments. Each of those comments were provided in the document and have specific keys tied to them with a response. In addition, there were summary of changes that were made to the document, And there weren't a lot, but there were a few. Most notably, there was a 25-year build-out projection, whereas we used 25 prior, and so we made some corrections to some of the projections there. There was an incorrect and unnecessary mitigation reference to Transportation 1A, and then we added a missing Class 3 bike facility that was not identified, and then there were some other typos and text errors. One of the comments that came out of the public hearing on the EIR was wanting to get a better sense of the intersection improvements that are proposed as mitigation. And so these are diagrams that were provided in the response to comments document. Now there are other improvements that I'm not showing here, such as signal modifications and the like, but those don't really result in physical alignment changes. I'm only showing the ones that result in lane changes. And so this is the Norris Canyon Road at Bishop Drive. And so you'll see that there's some modifications to the turning motions coming off Bishop Drive to Norris. And so if you have questions about that, the traffic engineer is here as well. Then we have Norris and Camino Ramon. And so we have a turn lane being proposed here on Norris Canyon Road that would head toward Camino Ramon North. And then also a turn lane that would be required for Alcosta Boulevard North turning on to Bollinger. So then in addition, as part of the EIR, we have the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And again, this is the tool that we use to ensure that the mitigations are implemented as described in the EIR. The document includes the mitigation measures themselves, a verification method, when those improvements need to occur. And then we also document who's responsible for that verification, whether it's city or an outside agency, and then a completion date. And so each phase of the project would be required to demonstrate compliance with the mitigation measures as applicable. And I will note also, and it'll come up later, that these mitigation measures are also incorporated in the draft conditions of approval. So moving from the environmental impact report to the master plan review, we're going to start with the general plan mixed use city center designation. And again, I put a quote here. This land use designation is intended to foster vibrant, integrated, and cohesive mix of civic, retail, office, residential, and open space uses, and promote a walkable, bikeable environment at the physical center of the city. And so through the process of the EIR, we had some analysis done in terms of consistency with the elements of the general plan, and that table is 310-4. It's also an attachment to the CEQA resolution that we'll talk about later. Also, this concept that's proposed for the master plan supports the council goals for locating housing in the city core and reducing pressure on development of shopping centers and also some of the open space areas within the city. And lastly, the proposal is consistent with the maximum of 1.35 floor area ratio. So again, the entire CCMU area is about 135 acres, 4,500 dwelling units. We talk about, again, the density, the mixed use, city center mixed use designation allows up to 50 units per acre. We're not reaching that threshold, so there's no density bonus proposed or required for this. As I mentioned, there's 15% of the units will be required to be deed restricted affordable for low and very low income houses, and that's based on our inclusionary standards for the city. And then again, these are affordable units that will count toward our arena allocation, but it's worth noting that because of the long-term build-out horizon, those units will likely be counted over multiple housing cycles. And so that's something that we're going to continue to investigate, is how those will count in the future. In terms of development standards, the CCMU zone, the city center mixed use zone, does not have a lot of detailed development standard. A lot of it's sort of performance based. We have the maximum dwelling units, the FAR. There is a clarification I want to make regarding height. The CCMU zoning designation does not have a height standard per se. However, there was a settlement agreement for the city center project that limited the height of the buildings within the city center approval areas to the maximum, and I believe it's 90 feet in that case. Everything outside the original city center project is limited to 85 feet. And so they're proposing 85 feet, so we don't have a consistency issue there. We're well exceeding the landscape standards, and then parking, we have a shared parking concept that we'll talk about in a moment. So in addition to the layout of the site plan, the applicant has provided design guidelines, and these are qualitative standards as opposed to prescriptive, but it helps define for future phases of the project. It will help define character and sense of place, location, intensity of land uses, the circulation systems, bike, auto, transit, pedestrian, and then also, some of the functional improvements, stormwater areas, traffic improvement, utilities, that kind of thing. It's broken into, the design guidelines are broken into two sections: community design principles common to all the neighborhoods, and then neighborhood design, which are more vignettes or blow-ups of specific areas, and it responds to the specific conditions of those areas. We did provide the guidelines to the Architectural Review Board for review. They did provide comments to the applicant, which were then incorporated into the document itself. And so in the next couple of slides, I'm going to highlight some of the changes that were accepted by the applicant. So there were several modifications to graphics within the plan to more clearly convey the importance of the Iron Horse Trail connections, as well as connections between the neighborhoods. There was new pages for open space connectivity and architectural treatment details, where those should occur, how those accent points would relate to streets. Revised landscape materials based on the soil conditions and also the need for reclaimed water use moving forward. And then neighborhood revisions themselves. These, again, the more detailed look for entry statements for both architecture and landscape, and then connections between the neighborhoods and the parks and public spaces. So here's an example of one of the new pages that was added. Again, emphasizing the landscape and open space framework, talking about connectivity. There's an index of numbered index of what those characteristics are. And again, it just helps to show how one might move around through the space and the hierarchy of circulation. Here's another one that's speaking to, again, the relationship between the public spaces and also edge treatments for architecture and accent points. And again, it's some of the entryways to the city along Bollinger Canyon Road, how the architecture relates to that. Also as the high profile corners, and again, relationship to parks and open space. And then at the neighborhood level, again, you can start to see how this gets refined down, and you're looking at, how some of the pedestrian boulevards will work, architectural details on the building to create, sight lines and vision connections from, Camino Ramon down to the parking structure. And again, it's an effort to try and refine some of the basic principles. Now, the details of what those elements are not part of this at this point. It's just acknowledging that this is an accent point that should be addressed. And so as part of future review of the neighborhood designs themselves, as part of the architectural review and site development, we'll have additional feedback on those items. Regarding the shared parking concept, a shared parking demand analysis was prepared by Gibson Transportation Consulting. The analysis indicates that about 14,466 parking spaces are required based on current code standards. The actual parking demand based on a peak analysis is about 11,200 spaces. And so that results in a 23% reduction approximately. Some of the assumptions that have gone into this is that there'll be one space per residential unit on site. And again, that's reserved parking that's going to be associated with the units themselves, whereas additional parking areas would be shared with commercial areas or pooled for residential uses. And again, that would include any overflow, guest parking, and again, it would relate to the commercial areas as well as those. And the way it works is the peak uses of residential and some of the commercial line up and allow for efficient use of the parking spaces. Each phase of this development would require a shared parking agreement that would be recorded on the site that would memorialize those agreements. And then it's worth noting that the applicant has the ability to assess the parking demand over the 27-year build out of the project. One of the important aspects of this is that there is the ability to potentially add parking if needed. Again, this is as opposed to being an infill in a residential neighborhood where you might be concerned about overflow into a neighborhood. This is a commercial office park. And so there's a lot of overview and control in terms of how this area functions and opportunities to solve problems should they arise. So we've also prepared draft resolutions for commission review. Resolution 1020 is related to the EIR itself, and it includes some environmental impact report and CEQA findings, and then the mitigation monitoring reporting program. And then there's a resolution 1120, which is for the project itself. And that includes the layout exhibit, conditions of approval, also includes the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. As I mentioned, that's included as conditions on all these future projects to ensure that the mitigation is applied in a uniform way. And then we also include, to support the findings for the resolution, the general plan consistency matrix is included as a reference. Now, the conditions of approval are set up in again, more of an overarching manner. There's a lot of standard conditions that would apply to any project, but there's some special conditions that we put together that are intended to sort of be almost placeholders and making sure that we address certain issues going forward. So one of them is future process, which includes, again, the fact that each of these future projects will go through its own process. There is a provision for construction sales tax sub-permit, and that's something that would help us fiscally in terms of making sure we recapture sales tax from large purchases related to construction. There's also requirements that the project basically fund city services be, somewhat cost neutral. So the CFD, lighting and landscape are all things that can be considered. We've had a lot of discussions about parks. There is a condition that they as per our ordinances, that they pay the park fees for a rental project. There's also provisions in there for police services when the demand gets there for additional staffing and resources. They need to fund those or enter into a different type of agreement to ensure that those services are provided. There's also provisions for housing, including the crime-free prevention program, which is applicable to all multifamily projects, and then a series of conditions related to construction noise, because it's a complicated phasing of development, and so there's some different conditions that need to be recognized over time. And then lastly, we added in information about other agency approvals, such as the fire district and utilities will serve letters, as well as impact fees that would be paid. Now, it's worth noting that those particular compliance with those particular conditions are the responsibility of each of those districts. They do have to verify that permits are ready to issue prior to the city issuing those permits. So that's the way that those are verified. And then lastly, we did include an attachment, which was an economic and fiscal impact analysis. And this was really for your information. And it actually looks at various funding associated with the project at both the county level and a local level. It breaks it down by one-time impacts related to construction, spending, and then ongoing operational impacts based on employment and spending habits. And again, you can see that there are some significant dollar revenues associated with countywide as well as locally. The study was provided along with the appendix, but again, it's an informational item more than anything. So at this point, staff is recommending that the commission receive the staff report and presentation, open public hearing, receive public testimony, close public comment portion of the hearing, and then ask questions, provide comments to staff. And then we're recommending that you continue the public hearing to August 4th for consideration of the EIR certification as well as adoption of the project as appropriate. Tonight we have Lisa Davison with First Carbon Solution that can help answer questions related to the response to comments document. And then we also have the applicant's representatives here, and I believe they'd like to speak before we start the public hearing and just to address the commission. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Lauren. So, well, that was quite a bit to digest, you know.
Sorry, I went quickly.
No, that's good. No, there's a lot to cover. Thanks, Lauren. So, so tonight, as Lauren said, there's a lot to cover. And so I know I see Alex Moran Jr. and Jerry. So we are we'll let them speak. We will open public comment. We will spend some time on all of these topics, and we'll also take a break. So we're not going to go until midnight without a break, I promise. And we do have some people that turned in some public comment. So why don't we first let the applicant speak. I'm not sure if Jerry, you would like to go first or Alexander would like to go first. So Jerry's off mute first. So it looks like Jerry gets to go first. I don't know. We'll let you decide.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Hi. Thank you. Good evening, Chair Alpert, members of the Planning Commission. Thanks for the opportunity to address you this evening for our proposed master plan. From August 19, 2019, including tonight, there have been a combination of 19 public hearings and outreach meetings on this project. So it's been a long and open dialogue, I think, between us and the community and the city. We want to thank staff and First Carbon for their extremely detailed analysis on this project. The draft, the EIR, and the response to comments were very thorough and well documented. I know this was raised at the last hearing, but I think it's important to reflect on the magnitude of receiving the endorsement from the Greenbelt Alliance, which they don't do to a lot of projects. And I think it speaks to the quality of the project's design and adherence to smart growth goals. So I think taken as a whole, this project ticks all the important boxes. There's a lot of things that, as Lauren brought up in the staff report, we are completely compliant with all applicable policies and goals of the general plan. It's completely within the zoning requirements with no density bonuses. And as Lauren pointed out, it's actually less than the allowed zoning. And this was done on purpose as an effort to strike an appropriate balance of solving the housing needs, both affordable and market rate, and smart goals and existing traffic infrastructure while providing the necessary density to create a sense of neighborhood for the urban core. It provides more open space than required, keeping in the spirit of the Bishop Ranch character that has been well established over a number of years. There are no unmitigated substantial impacts. It provides a balanced planned growth to the local housing area shortage and provides much needed workforce housing for low and very low income. So Sunset's very proud of the result that came out of a tremendous amount of thought and planning by all stakeholders involved in this process. And finally, we've read the staff report, the proposed conditions of approval, the resolutions, and we take no exceptions. Alexander and I are here to answer any questions as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay.
Chair Alpert and members of the commission, this is Alex Marin Jr. Just wanted to echo what Jerry said and reiterate my thanks to you all and staff for the great process and working together to formulate this plan. So appreciate your time and look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you. Okay. Jen, at this time, why don't we go ahead and open public comment, and we'll do any written comments while you give instructions for people to find the raise your hand button. I'll let you read those first.
Okay, sure. So before we open up public comment to the audience, we are going to address some of the late communication public comments that we received. In the meantime, when it is time to talk, you will either press the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone. Okay, so let's see here. The first late communications, we actually received several. So from Kimberly Norwood, Julie Van Sickle, David Jew, Catherine Harrington, all of these were voicing support for City Center Master Plan, citing revenue generation, housing, new amenities such as parks, landscaping, and recreational areas, as well as new job opportunities. So all of those comments were in favor of Citywalk Master Plan. A late communication item was also received from Mike Conklin, and this was stating support of Citywalk Master Plan, citing live work opportunities, local and affordable housing, the importance of including veterans, excuse me, veterans and seniors in long-term planning process.
Okay. And
we
just to
also, I'm sorry, we have a couple more. So
okay,
there were 2 additional late communication items. And this is from Jim Blickenstaff. Sorry, I'm just trying to navigate here. And it was related to long-range planning in light of the recent pandemic and rushing the development, transportation, housing, parks, public safety, population, hazardous materials, and water. And that was all for the public comments. So
okay. And I'll go ahead and reiterate, just like 1 moment. I'll go ahead and reiterate to the public 2 things. First of all, that all of the late communications was emailed to the Planning Commission this afternoon, and we have all received them and have read them all, and looking at the fellow commissioners, and they're shaking their heads that they have received them. So, Jen summarized who we got them, but the commissioners did all receive those communications this afternoon. And then secondly, for the benefit of the commissioners that don't know this, we do have 15 people watching on our Zoom channel, just so you know how many people are watching us tonight. And I don't know how many are on the YouTube channel, but there was a comment once before that they can't tell how many people watch us on these meetings. So just in case you're curious, there you go. So Jen, I'll turn it back to you to manage the public comment.
Thank you. Okay, so that wraps it up for our additional late communication items. And again, just as a reminder, when we receive letters or comments, we would like you to participate if you would like it to be read in full. So just to clarify, we don't typically read these out in full. We give a little synopsis of what the comment was, and if you would like to speak, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay, so moving on to the audience now, we'll go ahead and take public comment on 9.2 Citywalk Master Plan. And I'm going to start with Aparna. I'll go ahead and let you talk. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And then after 3 minutes, we'll go ahead and remute you. And we usually give you just a warning when you're getting close. So you are good to go, Aparna, if you're ready.
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Aparna.
Hi, how are you? Good evening. Aparna Madhireddy, 23-year Saramon resident, chair of the Open Space Advisory Committee. I still haven't had a full educational read through the entire thing, so I'm going to talk about one that is really something I think you should pay attention to. A lot of the economic impact projections are just that. They are projections. They are the assumptions through 2050. And a lot can change. As an eternal optimist, I would love to see retail thrive in our city, and I really hope it does well moving forward. My main concern is the shared parking at this point. There are many bills being proposed and talked about that authorizes residential development in on existing lots that are zoned for commercial office and retail space. And mainly this is because of the shifting nature after the pandemic. Consumer preferences, habits are changing, they're shopping online. So when you have a request for a minor use permit for shared parking, my concern is now people are working from home and it's becoming a way of life. These units are geared towards younger families, and seeing my daughter, she is working and she enjoys working from home most of the time. That's their culture now. They like to do things remotely. With the shared parking, the 8 to 5 shift in retail, how are we assuming that these people are going to be leaving in the daytime and coming back at night and using that area, which is essentially the concept for shared parking? So that can cause a lot of problems if we just go by the assumption of having, assuming that each residential unit will have one reserved parking space and the remaining demand will be shared parking. So I would really encourage you to look at the shared parking concept in a post-pandemic world a little bit more differently. Had it been before, definitely I would have seen this whole thing as a very viable option to make that area more vibrant for retail and for giving our economy a boost. But not at this point. I would, looking at what things are happening, this is something that can become a huge problem moving forward. So those are my thoughts for now. I will start reading more and come back later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna.
Thank you. Okay, so I will go ahead. We have Luz Gomez. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak, and you'll have 3 minutes as well.
Okay. Hi, Luz.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Luz Gomez. I'm a 40-year resident of San Ramon. I care deeply about our future, and I'm really happy that you all are giving this project a lot of thought. I think this project holds a lot of promise for our city, and thank you, Lauren, for that excellent presentation. I do have a couple of remaining questions. You mentioned, for example, that the project would be expected to address impacts, including providing sufficient police services. My question has to do with whether the project and the applicant would be expected to also contribute toward community services. Obviously, this population will increase the demand for our classes, our library hours, our summer camps, our schools, and so curious about how that might be addressed. Also, you mentioned that there would be construction noise mitigations, and I would also add that the city ought to really look at dust construction mitigation as well. I know that there is a regulation in the Bay Area about this, but oftentimes it comes down to locals being able to impose their own limits because the air district may not be able to get here fast enough. So definitely consider dust mitigations for air quality. In terms of economic considerations, given the uncertainties brought on by COVID-19, I'm just really urging everyone involved in this to think about what's the proper balance for office versus commercial versus retail space versus living. Many more people will be possibly doing live work environments. So as this moves forward, we may need to think about planning for live work environments. where people are telecommuting. Last comment in terms of community engagement, it's complicated, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Thank you for sharing that there are 15 people watching. I would have loved to see many more. I think this is such a big and important project for our future. I would love to see more engagement. I would like to recommend some way to communicate to the entire community of San Ramon what stage we're in, and the fact that there's only a couple of remaining hearings potentially for this project, for this concept idea, which, like I said, holds a lot of promise. So that's my comment for tonight.
Great. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and see if there's
Oh,
anybody
we have
else.
one more. One more
Okay. Yes,
speaker.
I do see that. Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and Mike, you can now talk.
Thank you for allowing me some time. I've written a nice letter. I thought it was nice in my layman's term, but I really want to just say thank you to all of our planning commissioners and staff, especially our planning commissioners who volunteer their time to do such great things for our city. And so I really respect your commitment and your service above self. I want to talk a little bit about, what our forefathers planned as we have a well-rounded and progressive community. We really did accept the responsibility to provide opportunity not only to our citizens and our offspring, but to our growing population. If our forefathers had not adopted and deployed this vision, San Ramon would not likely exist today as the jewel city of Contra Costa County and the greater Bay Area. As you all know, the world's changing rapidly, faster than ever before. The transportation systems that we have now very well could become obsolete in 20, 30 years. So looking at that and all of the current situation related to CV-19, we may be getting an early glimpse at what working from home or remote working will require in the future. The question is, can we leverage this situation, learn from it concerning what the future can look like when we no longer have to transport our bodies to an office work site, when we can use technology instead. And lastly, looking at what San Ramon will look like in 50 years, I won't be here, neither will many of you. What we can do and what we must do is leverage, leave a legacy to our children and the future residents of our city, San Ramon, of good planning and vision that says we planned for your future, not just ours. We made room at our city's table of abundance for you. I think that's something we all just need to think about. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike, for coming out tonight.
Okay.
I do not see any more hands, so I will go ahead and close public comment at this point. And at this point, does the applicant have any response to the public comments that they would like to make?
This is Jerry. No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so prior to us beginning, Lauren, did you have any guidance for how you would recommend we can move forward for tonight?
Yeah, thank you. Again, we gave you a lot of information, resolutions and the like. Part of that was with the understanding that we have another meeting coming up on the 4th of August. But at the same time, we want to get issues resolved or questions out there that we need to resolve to get you to a point where you can make a decision one way or the other. So I would recommend just literally going down the list of topics, with the EIR, questions, concerns about response to comments, the master plan and guidelines, parking, and then draft resolution and conditions, and just let's go topic by topic rather than bouncing around.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, that's good advice. So, as Lauren said, I think we'll we'll follow that. And we've been here for about an hour and 40 minutes. I'm going to look and see if there's time for a break, or do we want to get started and then break in a bit? So I can't, we'll just jump right in. So why don't we go ahead and start talking about the EIR. And Lauren, the EIR really, the final EIR is really, it's a combination of multiple piece parts. It starts with the draft EIR, it's the response to comments, it's the mitigation and monitoring program, and then it's the errata summary. Right. And the combination of all of those documents is what in sum make up the final EIR, I believe.
That's correct.
And so, I think, we can, if we want to break down the total sum of it, we've had at least one session on the draft EIR last time. And then the new information that was presented tonight, in our packet was the response to comments, and then the mitigation and monitoring program, and the errata summary. So in the pleasure of the commission, we can discuss any or all of the sum of the final EIR package tonight, with questions. And again, Lauren did mention, we do have first Carmen on the phone tonight to address any questions. Lisa's with us tonight, for questions or clarification or.
And through the chair, I just would add another point that came up. So again, the CEQA document is about disclosing information to inform decision making. And so what we're really looking to understand is the document adequate in its presentation and identification of issues and concerns, as well as mitigation measures. As I mentioned, the document itself did not identify any significant unavoidable impacts. And so we have a series of mitigation measures that we feel can address, those areas of concern to a level of less than significance once they're implemented. And so, and I think this was also a comment that was raised by one of the commissioners at another meeting. The certification of the EIR is independent of the project. Again, it's a document, a standalone document regarding, the scope of review. It's a precursor to making a decision on the project, but the two are not directly linked in the sense that, you can't approve this if you're not going to approve that. Again, it's about disclosure of information and adequacy of information.
Questions for clarification or things that were not clear?
I have a clear.
Go ahead.
Okay. And thank you for trying to make this very clear to the newbie. So we have this document that identifies mitigations, many of which, in my opinion, deal with the construction phases of it. So I'm looking at the mitigation and monitoring reporting grid. All of these mitigations would be revisited each time there would be a new neighborhood for, portion. So it would sort of like clear the screen, start all over, mitigation number, the air quality, the dust, and the checklist would still reapply each time there's another phase.
That's correct. The mitigation measures, particularly the construction-related ones, would be repeated. Some of the improvements for traffic, once they're done, they're done. Mm-hmm. But to address the concern about dust control, as an example, there are mitigation measures that require implementation of dust control measures based on the air quality management district standards. That would be applied to every phase of construction based on those standards.
Okay, that was my impression, but I just wanted to have that clarified and stated for the record. Thank you.
And Lauren, I have a question, you know, on when it comes to, and Deb's still around, I think, Deb Fair, when it comes to the traffic ones, you know, how often does the city typically take a look? Because some of the traffic mitigations are when warranted based on a full study. Are those typically done, you know, based on an annual cycle, a semi-annual, or every few years they just do it? Or does it when people start calling you off and saying, boy, this intersection looks bad? Or how does that typically happen?
We look at least once a year, you know, just give it a kind of a cursory review. And if we think that it needs any deeper study, then we will do a deeper study on it. Yeah, it's typically just look at it once a year and make a decision from there.
So all of these ones are saying when warranted, it's not going to get so bad that it should have happened 5 years ago. The city typically is on these things pretty, you know, like yearly, more or less, you know, it feels like, okay. And then sort of similar, we're writing this document not for us, but for the San Ramon employees of the future, you know, and I'll just kind of throw it out there for just reaction. These are written in a way that are going to stand the test of time, you know, and that's sort of my just overarching question about this document and this MMR, you know, if somebody writes this, you know, in 10 years from now, and Debbie's not here and Lauren's not here and Deb's not here, you know, this is written in language that they're going to understand, I assume, and it's going to make sense. You know, that's kind of the way this document has to exist, because it's a master plan that's going to have to live for 27 years, you know.
Yeah.
That's the nature of this, isn't it? You know,
it is. That's not to say that mitigation doesn't necessarily evolve over time. Standards change, the air district will change standards. And so it ultimately comes down to whether or not the mitigation is effective. And so what we have is the best technology at this time. But again, in the future, it may be necessary to revisit mitigation based on, you know, standards in 10 years from now. But for now, we know what the standards are. They're implementable, they're understandable to staff members, and again, they're conditions on every project as applicable. Not every mitigation measure is applicable to every phase of the project, as an example.
Mhm.
I had some questions. Now, I did talk to Lauren about this over the last 2 days. It's always seemed to me that with respect to the EIR, that the two key issues were traffic and parking. And I've gone through the traffic study as well as I can, being a layperson. I had 1 or 2 questions, but they're really minor. I'll deal with that offline with Lauren or Ms. Fair. With respect to the parking study, I went through that a couple of times. I found it a little bit difficult to figure out how they got in one place to a maximum demand of 8,700 spaces, whereas in another one it talks about 11,200, which is exactly what the parking is supposed to be in Citywalk. I had a little more philosophical question. A partner raised an issue which has been brought up before, and that has to do with what if we're wrong about how many cars people are going to use in this area. I mean, the thrust is live, work. That may not apply. People may want to live in Citywalk and commute to some place like Hayward to work. So there's a car issue. There's 2 areas that I had a question on, and Lauren, forgive me, because you and I talked about this before, but I still had some concerns. The first is BR1A, and that is by Marketplace. And when Lauren and I talked earlier, the idea was if there was a need for overflow parking, you had the parking lots in the BR section right next to it. But as Lauren pointed out on one of the drawings, right now what they've planned for the difference between BR1A and the parking lots in, I forget which BR it's called, is a medical office building. And I wonder whether the fact that you have a building between BR1A and the parking lots might not affect the usefulness of those parking lots as overflow parking for BR1A. That's, address that now, or?
Could I just clarify? Bishop Branch 1B is actually to the west of 1A. There's parking to the south, directly to the south, associated with the one Bishop Branch 1 complex. But the point that we discussed and that I made was that, again, this is a build out over a long period of time, and there's opportunities to adapt to changing conditions. I mean, the applicant themselves wants their project to work in a way that provides adequate parking, doesn't overpark it. And so in the event that there are problems, there are cure mechanisms because they own the properties around them. And so that's one of the critical aspects that I think needs to be acknowledged here. Is again, it's not in isolation. You know, they have other properties that they have the ability to adapt with. And, but again, it's in their interest to have the thing parked correctly. So.
Right, and that sort of plays into the other area that I had a question about, which was basically the BR 2600 area. It may be that it's not sufficient to carry the parking that demand that's placed on it. And as you pointed out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this issue comes up as the development is built out. And if it turns out that the current parking, shared parking isn't satisfactory, there's a mechanism by having shared parking for other portions of Business Ranch, are there not?
Yeah, as an example, the hotel concept is parked in a different parking structure altogether.
Right.
So again, there are recourses that they can consider as the large property owner of all the adjacent properties. But again, another point I'd like to make is shared parking in particular functions well when you're talking about large number of parking spaces. You know, in a smaller project, there's less margin of error, but when you're talking about 14,000 parking spaces or 11,000 parking spaces, the dynamics of scheduling and just the way individual people move around in a project creates opportunities for shared parking. So there will be spaces available. Where you run into probably more issues is when it's constrained, you know, and so and those are business decisions, and whether they do unbundled parking and require people to pay for their second vehicle, those are all ways that they can encourage public transit as opposed to you know, going with automobile circulation. So there's a lot of potential, and not to mention the TDM program that they have, which is all considered in this as well.
I had a question about the design guidelines, which I went over again today.
Okay,
Commissioner Wallace, you're jumping the gun a little bit. That's
We're trying
okay.
to deal
That's
with
okay.
environmental first.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. But no. Hold that thought. Just make sure that we don't lose sight of anything related to the EIR. If there are other comments and questions, because I want to make sure we fully go vet those questions. Commissioner Frank or Commissioner Marks, were there questions or comments? I want to make sure we don't lose any of those questions or comments on this before we jump to the second topic.
I don't have any questions or comments right now based on the hierarchy of how we're doing this.
Okay. On the EIR or response to comments or the errata sheet. Commissioner Marks.
Like Commissioner Frank, I don't have any comments regarding the documents that you're talking about right now.
On the EIR, okay.
Chair Alpert,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I just to Commissioner Wallace's comment about the shared parking and in response to what we heard in public comment, I actually, and I just want to, you know, throw my 2 cents in. you know, the Aparna's comment about the change in work from home, I took that to imply that the assumptions about shared parking was, you know, people go to work, leaving their parking places available to the office people coming in who work during the day. What I took her comment to mean is, what happens to your shared parking concept if those living there don't ever leave and you still have office people coming in? So I just wanted to say that that was my interpretation of her comment.
And I believe that is true. And however, I do
And so
want
I
to,
just want to,
yeah, I
Okay.
do. And we're gonna do a much deeper discussion on shared parking. But I do want to make sure that
Okay.
we've fully discussed the EIR portion, because Lauren, you know, if there's no further discussion, hypothetically, you know, we've fully discussed the EIR portion of what we were going to discuss tonight, you know, on this. At some point, I think based on what you've already talked about, you know, we've discussed the draft EIR, the response to comments, the errata sheet, all the MMR. You know, at some point we're going to be prepared then, in a perfect world now, later tonight, we're going to talk about the resolution and related to the EIR, you know, unless we have some more discussion related to this, because I haven't heard any more comments or questions that you would like us to talk about tonight related to that.
I have no other concerns.
Okay. Just want to make sure, you know. Okay. I don't see anybody raising their hand that they want to talk about this. Okay, good. Okay, now topic 2 would be design. You want to do design guidelines, or everyone just can't wait to get to shared parking? But you want? Shall we talk about design guidelines, or we want to jump right to shared parking?
Pleasure of the commission.
Pleasure of the commission. Oh boy, what's?
Why don't we just go ahead and talk about the master plan and design guidelines, and then we can have a more robust discussion on shared parking.
That sounds good. Why don't we do design guidelines, then we'll take a break, and then we will do shared parking. So save your shared parking questions till after the design guidelines. Let's do design guidelines.
And so maybe just to start you off, I'll just again reiterate this idea of this being an umbrella or a framework plan, and each phase requiring its own level of review and consistency with the guidelines, as well as architectural review and planning commission review. And so again, the guidelines themselves are intended to be not be prescriptive, but rather qualitative. And so we're, again, trying to establish a series of principles and concepts that will be repeated over time, but yet still have flexibility to be creative and have the best product possible for the future developments. That being said, I've left you speechless.
And Lauren, with that said, though, you know, each and every, and you've said it before, but to emphasize, each and every one of the buildings, parks, community buildings will go through a complete and full design review process with architecture review, planning commission review, public hearing process with public comment in the future. And these are high-level guidelines. So this is just high-level design guidelines, not meant to be very specific at this point, you know.
I mean, they're not specific in terms of their content, but they cover a wide range of topics. There's a lot of information in them and things to consider. And it's really, in a lot of ways, it highlights the design process that any designer would go through in terms of creating a project that has a sense of place, that's integrated, connectivity, architectural emphasis, And so, again, those are the themes, the recurring elements that we want to see in each of these neighborhoods as they come in. And so that's really the guidance that the guidelines hope to provide.
I had a question. Most of the guidelines are exactly as you describe them. We prefer this, they should do this. The question I have is there's a couple of guidelines that have specific numerical components to them, like the distance between buildings and things of that sort. Are those intended to be descriptive or binding?
That's a good question. I mean, there are different code requirements that may be applicable for fire access clearances. There's also a degree of setback requirements from property lines that are code related. We would relate to, I mean, the guidelines would not be binding on the city in terms of development standards. We would apply standards that are correct for the zoning and, again, health safety concerns. In this case, it's more of a desire for them to have some consistency and a uniform feel for the common spaces and landscape. I don't know if Jerry wants to weigh in a little more on it, or if I covered it, but again, these are this is an image of what they would like to accomplish as articulated through the guidelines, and they can always exceed standards. They're exceeding in landscape and everything else, but again, we still have the minimum standards of the CCMU that we review against. Jerry? Okay, I guess he's good with that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respond a little bit. I'm satisfied with the guidelines as they're currently written. I've had a chance also to talk with Lauren about them, and I understand what he is saying. The thing I'd just like to bring up for other commissioners who haven't worked with guidelines, one of the key questions is how and when they are discussed and brought into the plans that get brought before the Planning Commission. It's one thing to bring a set of plans before the Planning Commission wherein an applicant says, here's what we'd like to do, and we think we have implemented your guidelines as well as we can, which can put an applicant and the city in the position of either being in an adversarial position or an applicant saying, look, I've already spent all this time and money. Another way to do it, and this is just more of a process point, is when an applicant is meeting with the city early on in that process, and typically there are meetings with city staff before things come to the Planning Commission, the staff can say to the applicant, we ought to have, and Lauren, I don't recall what we're calling it now, a pre-design meeting or preliminary review or whatever we're calling it, but we can have one of those where it's a talking session, where the guidelines that might apply as we approve them at some point can be discussed with an applicant, and the applicant can understand from the commissioners which guidelines we think are applicable to that project and that we'd like to see in the plans before they actually take pen to paper and draft whatever they're going to show us in blueprint form. So guidelines as currently written, it seemed to me are fine. The process by which we bring the guidelines into the design could offer the Planning Commission an early opportunity to talk about the guidelines with the applicant before plans are developed. And it's my hope in the future that we will do something like that.
Are these the concept reviews that some applicants take advantage of and others choose not to?
Yeah, I couldn't think of the term, and I apologize for that. But what I'm talking about is essentially just a discussion. the applicant would have the guidelines, we would have the guidelines. And we can just talk about what do we see that we think is important, and where's their flexibility. The applicant's going to propose with the blueprint set what ultimately works for them, what ultimately gets them where they feel they need to go, and they'll have justification for it. But at least the Planning Commission is not in second place, where it is now in a position where it has to respond to a set of blueprints and marginally make changes if it thinks changes are needed.
If I could just comment briefly on that. So the concept review process is something that we often will put out to applicants that we have concerns about their particular proposal, or there's some question that we're not entirely comfortable with, and we can't give them a good reading as to what standard practice is in the city. And so we bring it to the commission as a sounding board. And so there is that potential. I just wanted to acknowledge one, and I'm going to cheat and jump ahead to the conditions for a second here. Under the current proposal, we've added a condition that the development plan and architectural review go to the Planning Commission. That is actually not a requirement of our code. It's a condition that we put in place. Under our current code, development plans can be approved by the zoning administrator or can be kicked up to the Planning Commission. And so there's already essentially a check and balance in place by bringing it to the Planning Commission as part of it. And I do understand Mr. Marks' concern about someone feeling locked in. What I can say to that is that we do have a development review committee review of staff. And then obviously we have architectural review board review prior to even getting to the Planning Commission. So there are going to be opportunities to provide input on these things. And it's just not as quite prescriptive as the commission dictating a design aesthetic or having a feedback at the beginning. But again, they ultimately have the authority as this condition is established now.
Great. Okay. Other questions or comments regarding the design guidelines? Okay. And Lauren, ultimately the design guidelines are going to be attached to the resolution, not the certification of the EIR, but the resolution. Is that correct?
The design guidelines are part of the master plan packet. I probably should clarify that the master plan consists of the actual land use plan itself, design guidelines. It also includes the narrative package, the design package, and then the shared parking analysis.
Okay.
So all those things collectively create this vision and are all the tools that staff will use to assess future proposals.
Okay. Okay.
That's helpful.
Okay. So no comments. Okay. I think now would be a good time for a short little break. And then when we come back, we will do what probably is the main attraction, shared parking. Doesn't get better than that. So why don't we take, why don't we go ahead and take 5 minutes? So 5 minutes on whatever watch you're looking at, and we'll come back, and that's what we'll do.
Okay.
Okay. It looks like we're all back. Okay, are we ready to get going again? Okay. Commissioner Wallace, did you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I covered all the points on shared parking that I had.
Yeah.
So I'll lather it back to you.
Okay, so there was some questions about shared parking, and I know one of the items that I think was certainly of interest was the assumptions. And Lauren, you said shared parking, at least in this case, when both sides of the question were owned by the same party, there's a lot more. There's two assumptions that make things different than in most cases. One, the size of the pool. It works to the favor of all. And then secondly, when both sides of the arrangement are owned by the same, you have certain flexibility that you might have in other cases where, you have to get multiple parties. So you want to elaborate on both of those perhaps, and then.
Yeah, again, well, first I'll talk just about the scale. A great example is BR 26 when it was originally approved. I mean, you're talking about, 6,000 parking spaces for that building alone. And for those of you that have been to that building, you know that most of the outlying area is not used. And again, there's some critical, just a critical volume of spaces that exists. And so when you add in multiple uses, the dynamics of different people's schedules, different land use timing and everything else, you have a better chance of succeeding with a large pool. Something else that I'll just mention that was, there was a comment brought up about, working from home and, COVID, changes that may stick, may not. You might all recall that working from home was a big deal several years ago until the high-tech companies started calling everybody back in. Now they're sending them back out again. So it ebbs and flows to a point. But one of the things that I would mention is, this is, it's very hard to regulate behavior. So you make some assumptions about how people will behave based on where they work, what they want to do, and their what you understand schedules to be. But that's not to say that things won't change. I could make the same argument that someone who's working from home no longer needs two cars. Why would they go to the expense of having two cars when one could do, or even a car share? I mean, there's a lot of trends these days, especially among the younger workers that just don't need to have the same need for cars. They have the opportunity for transit, connectivity to employment, good internet from home, a lifestyle center where they can go to eat and drink. And so, a share car could fill that void. So again, we're speculating on behavior. And so when we talk about, mixed use concepts, we're basing it on some studies and assumptions that have been done over the years on how people actually behave in parking situations. And so I think, again, we have the opportunity here because of the ownership interest of the surrounding area to solve problems that might exist. We're also talking about a 27-year build out. And so, and I would even argue that, within any one neighborhood, you might be looking at 7 to 10 years before even the shared parking concept was in place, just because of the time it takes to build individual units. So, it could come down to a question of periodically reassessing parking demand and needs. Are the assumptions holding true? Is it what you thought it was? If there's a concern about, a potential cure mechanism. And so, again, I'm kind of rambling on, but at the same time, it's not an exact science because we're dealing with people's personal choices and behavior. Some people like cars, some people don't. You know, it's a lot of lifestyle choices that get made in terms of where people choose to live, whether it's an apartment or, you know, a single family home. And so we're adding a single family component and we're providing people the opportunity to live in an area that's not as auto dependent as a suburban environment typically is. So anyway, I hope I didn't miss the point entirely, but.
No. Helpful. Okay. Questions or comments at this point? So I can tell you, I worked in that building for 27, 28 years, and my understanding was it was approved by the county with less parking than current standards. And I can tell you there were a few years that I had to park in the far edge of the lot, and I complained because I had to walk from the edge of the lot, but I'd never ever found trouble parking in that parking lot, even though probably when it was built, there were probably people that complained there wasn't going to be enough parking places, you know. And there was about 3 years where they were forced to do what they called valet parking. So that meant there was somebody that was in the lot that parked your car if you got there past about 9 o'clock, which if you adjusted your behavior, you got there before 9 o'clock and there's a parking place. So, you know, I understand there's such thing as cures if, you know, it's a problem, but, you know, and when I was looking at it, my sense was when you talk about cures, where there might not be enough parking is maybe in perhaps the later phases where you're starting to sense there could be more people with cars than perhaps, you know, the shared parking may not be working. Maybe there's too many people in the building working, and you know, the assumptions around people per building or people per residence, maybe in perhaps the later phases, you know, when you start to build phases 2 and 3 and 4, you know, all of a sudden you might start to find that, you know, you might need to adjust whether it's more parking, but then you're also out 20 and 25 years, and then your assumptions start to break down further and further by then, and then you have more opportunities to, you know, be wrong, or you might have to spill over to all the surface parking that's also owned by Sunset. And, you know, there's lots of opportunities to correct by the time you start to move out past 3 or 4 or 5 years, you know. So I understand what you're saying, Lauren. It's really hard to predict if, you know, more than a few years out, you know.
Yeah, one other thing that I would just also add in is, you know, when we talk about this peak demand, essentially that's the minimum that they're establishing. You need 1,007 spaces to accommodate BR1 1A, and I think there was an exhibit at one of our workshops a while back with Rob Elliott presented a design of how they lay out parking structures, and they're modular in nature. And so to get to the number of parking spaces, it's not likely to be 1,007. It may be 1,050. It may be 1,100. There's just certain construction parameters that are going to dictate, you know, how the layout of parking occurs and what the yield of parking is on an individual project. And again, I would defer to Jerry if he has a different opinion about that. But, you know, again, you know, I was looking at the modular that each, you know, level of parking contains a certain number, and you're not going to, you know, somehow not provide parking spaces just because you've met your number if you've already built the space. So again, that's a consideration. And then also, you know, depending on the phasing of the parking structures, there's the ability to add additional capacity to those depending on the design and when they occur. So again, it's the property owner and the applicant that in the long run has to solve their own problem. Sorry, Jerry, I saw you getting ready, and I don't know, do you want to comment on how, you know, modular parking works in these designs in a podium situation?
Lauren, I think you characterized it exactly right. The only other thing I would add is that in my experience over the last 25 years, parking demand has has decreased over time. It has not increased. And as we get into the more ride share and car share and things that are happening, it's continuing to decrease over time and not increase. And we also have Pat Gibson, who's in, that can give you any other technical data around this analysis and how shared parking works around the country, because he's done a number of these shared parking analysis and seen them in action over the last probably 40 or 50 years. So there's a lot of experience there. And you know, again, I think the most important point here is that this is going to be built over time. We have a lot of opportunity to correct. The intent here was to be as efficient as possible, not overbuild and have to tear down parking structures in the future when you could use it for open space or other items and amenities that don't need to, you know, you don't need to have extra parking that's going to remain empty. And I think if you look over history, and I know in my experience, retail used to always be parked in large retail centers at 5 per thousand. And the only time you ever needed that was 1 or 2 days at Christmas. And the rest of the time, the parking lot was empty. And so with shared parking and with parking management programs, you were able to reduce that down to 3 over the last, you know, umpteen years of time. And so I think there's a concern because we're pretty auto-centric in the suburban market, but as we're, you know, again, building this mixed use center, I think, you know, this has been proven in much more dense markets throughout the country to work. And if there's a technical question, we can
I think Jerry was going to say promote Pat Gibson to answer them. Are there technical questions from the traffic engineer, traffic study?
I think you're muted.
Thank you, Jen. Commissioner Marks? Okay, there we go.
I wanted to say I agree with Lauren and Jerry that this is a reasonable bet. The key, though, in my opinion, is not so much who the owners of all the parking areas are, but rather the reciprocal easements that may or may not be in place that can be called upon if needed. And if there are reciprocal easements within the city center area that can be called upon if one particular property is having some problems with parking, that seems to me your back door. But I don't see this as a problem relative to shared parking. And in fact, I see it as correcting some of the problems that we've made in the past as planners, where we overparked almost everything. And it just seems to me that, again, over 27 years, we're not going to have to wait 27 years to see whether it works. We're going to see things happen more quickly than that. And as long as there are reciprocal easements on other properties that can be called upon, we may have to adjust our zoning ordinance such that the allowable distances between where the parking is and where the front door of a building may have to be elongated. But that's a buyer's situation or a renter situation. If it's too far a distance, don't rent the unit, don't buy the unit for your second car. But it just seems to me that on balance, for me at least, this is one of the better aspects of this project, to get rid of parking lots, at-grade parking lots that sit there vacant and simply collect leaves.
Great, thank you. Okay, with no additional questions looking around. So Lauren, at this point, we've covered the EIR, the design guidelines, and the shared parking arrangement. And the last, we have actually 2 items that we'd like to talk about, and I'm going to ask you to frame how you would like us to talk about, and that's the resolution regarding certifying the EIR and approving the master plan. But before we jump to that, you did mention that you included for our review, but more as a sort of an optional item, the fiscal impact analysis, not really a hard discussion item, but really more of a sort of an informational item, you know. So before we jump to those, if there's anything that you'd want to say about that, and, you know, I'll let you do that first. You know.
I mean, I really don't have a lot to say about it. If Jerry wants to weigh in a little bit on it, I think that would be appropriate since they commissioned the study. But again, it's showing that there are some fiscal considerations that you know occur. But again, that's not part of the land use decision process that we're going to go through. But it is most certainly affects how we provide services and the economy in a larger sense.
Correct.
Jerry?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's correct. We commissioned the study for two reasons. One was to ensure that the revenues coming from this project, both temporary and permanent, were enough to offset the cost of city services for our project. As Alexander in one of our very first presentations had said, that our goal and our promise was to make this project revenue neutral to the city, so it wasn't a drain on city services. So the analysis was an attempt to try to study and understand the amount of revenues that would be generated on an ongoing basis of operations for this project, and whether that would offset the cost of city services, police and fire and all of those other things. And what that study indicates is that there's a significant amount of positive revenue to the general fund that will come from this project. Now, it is a study and it will yet to be proven. And so there's a condition of approval that if it doesn't prove out that way, that there could be some additional means of revenue, whether it's a CFD district of some form or lighting and landscape district or something like that. But we're pretty confident in this study, and that the firm that did this study has done numerous studies for not only developers, but for cities around the country. And the city actually had an independent third party economic consultant review this analysis, review all the assumptions underlining the analysis, and agreed with the results coming out of this analysis. The other aspect of this was to kind of let the city understand the positive side of this from an economic standpoint. So everybody's worried about traffic impacts and the impacts on the environment, which we've, of course, studied and to make sure we had no unmitigated substantial impacts. But there's also the benefit side of this, which is creating more jobs, both permanent and temporary construction jobs, the amount of economic stimulus into the economy, both regionally within the county and directly to the city. So there are a number of benefits also that come with a project like this that we wanted to be able to capture and bring to your attention. We always study the economic or study the environmental impacts, but this is really some of also the benefits that come with a project of this nature. And so that was the purpose of the study, to show and demonstrate to the city there are some significant upsides as well that go along with this project.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Thanks for that. Okay. So Lauren, so tonight you would like us, and I'll let you frame how you would like us and what you would like us to accomplish as we review the two draft resolutions that you presented tonight in the package, and where you would like us to end up with in tonight's discussion.
Well, okay, so let's start with the environmental resolution. So the structure of the resolution is a lot of history, events, what's happened when and who. But the meat of it is the findings that go along with it. And so those are the decisions that we're asking the commission to essentially ratify. Do you agree with those findings as we're presenting them? And so when you read through them, we're looking for a concurrence, or if there's something that is not worded the way you would word it, or some differences of opinions about how mitigation measures have been addressed. That's the kind of thing we need to know. It's a very comprehensive document. It's repetitive to a lot of the aspects of the EIR, which have already been vetted. So many of the things are sort of almost matter of fact. We're restating what was already stated as a way of closing the loop on a question. So I don't know how much, into the weeds you want to get in with that. But ultimately, we're asking you to say that you agree with those things. And so we want that to be a true statement. And so to that end, we need you to go through it and make sure you concur with the assertions we're making in certifying the EIR. Regarding the conditions of approval, it's a similar sort of thing. Again, as I mentioned, and we keep coming back to this, that each project will have the opportunity to be conditioned again. So this starts to become a template for those key issues that we want to make sure we address in future reviews. And so the conditions of approval, we talk about process, we talk about noise, the mitigation measures are incorporated by reference, police services, fire services, all those things are important boxes that we need to recognize as part of future reviews. And then there's a series of standard conditions that would apply to almost any development project. And so we're less concerned about the details of those, because that's really a placeholder for any project we do needs a grading permit. It needs a site development permit. But the special conditions are where I think you really have the opportunity to make sure, the vision that you have for this project is clear and is accomplishing, the not lack of a better word, not philosophical, but the items that you feel are important to recognize in future developments going forward. And so we have the commitment that parks are important. We have the commitment that police services are important. And so we sewer connections are important. And so we've identified those areas. So if there's something that we're lacking, or something that is in a standard condition that you'd like to be elevated to take on a special condition status, we'd like to hear about that as well, and get the consensus from the commission. But ultimately, we want to be able to bring you back documents at this next meeting, so you're capable of making a decision. And we feel like, based on the comments tonight, there wasn't a huge amount of discussion on many of these topics. So what I'm feeling is that we're in a place to make a decision fairly quickly, and I just want to make sure that we're giving you what you need to make that decision.
Okay, thank you, Lauren, for that overview of the process for how we go forward. So, again, tonight, we don't need to, and Lauren didn't say this, but he does not want to hear about typos tonight. Feel free to, he was being too polite, so feel free to email him missing commas or misspelled words, Commissioner Wallace and Commissioner Frank, not calling you out, but you'll find them. And Commissioner Marks, you all get three. But so if you see anything that you noticed as you're reading this prior tonight that you'd like to discuss, or something was missing, or you'd like to emphasize, I think those are the kinds of things we want to talk about tonight, because the expectation, I think, based on what Lauren has shared tonight and what he and I chatted about, is if we're comfortable, tonight is meeting number 2 of, SB 330 allows up to 5. And as we talked about before, a minimum of 1 is being allocated to the city council. But, based on everything we've discussed, it feels that, for all intents and purposes, we're very close to being, ready to send this, to actually finish our work after probably meeting number 3 but, that remains to be seen, but, let's make sure that we've captured and shared and discussed any changes we'd like to see or items that we're not sure about or we need further discussion, whether it's certifying the EIR or the actual, master plan tonight, so that, by next week, we might be in a position to make a decision, So first, why don't we start with, the certifying of the EIR? Is there anything that people heard tonight that they felt needed further discussion?
Chair Alpert, I don't know if that would include going over the draft conditions in the resolution. If so, then yeah, I guess I should. There's only one issue I wanted to talk about.
Go ahead. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I think that's the second topic. Right now, we're talking about the first resolution.
The first resolution.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right. I'll wait.
We'll get to the second one in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll mute again.
Commissioner Kuznick.
You're muted.
Heck. I think I was still on mute. As a point of reference, this thing is so multi-pages. Could we reference a page number as we're talking about which sections of these things?
It starts with page 146. It's
Okay.
resolution 10.
I just want to be able to know what I'm
Yeah.
following along with. Thank
Yes.
you. That's all.
And it includes the resolution, and then it includes, the resolution, and then it's Exhibit A to the resolution, which then starts on page 153.
Okay.
Which is Exhibit A, which is,
So
number of pages.
there's the issue are two different things. Do we agree with the resolution hypothetically? And then part B is, are these
the findings.
findings accurate? Just
Yes.
to clarify what we're being
Right.
asked for. Thank you.
Yes. And if there's any questions or clarification or anything whatsoever,
Okay.
and then lastly, it's attached to is the mitigation monitoring and
Mhm.
reporting program.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So seeing no changes, then essentially it'll look the same at our next meeting as it looks now, with the possible exception of those typos and things and missing commas, but
And just to be clear, if staff makes any revisions, we will highlight those for you.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, now let's talk about resolution 11-20, and that starts on packet page 227.
Okay, thank you.
Again, and the resolution itself is actually a resolution. It is a layout. It's conditions of approval. It's, again, the same mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And then this includes the general plan consistency table. And we haven't really talked about that, but I think we did cover it at a previous meeting.
We did. The table is extracted from the EIR land use section. And so it's a summary of various elements, policies, and how this plan furthers them. And again, it's to add to the administrative record as to consistency with the general plan. It's just, we're doing it by reference rather than restating it individually.
Okay. Commissioner Frank, you said you had a comment on this section.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm doing this all electronically, and this was probably a bad week to start trying to go paperless. So I'm searching around and I'm looking at my notes and I'm trying to make sure I'm commenting in the right area. But my comment just had to do with the park space condition, and I'm still not sure I'm in the right section as I look at my notes that I tried to do online. So I'm going to go for my paper notes, but I just had a comment that I wanted to make, and I'll invite Lauren or Debbie to comment after I sort of make this statement that I wanted to make. But understanding that and I'm speaking about the general plan park requirement that as I now understand, cannot be imposed on this applicant. It's not the applicant's problem per se. It's more of a citywide issue that we have. And I raise it now because I believe it's relevant to the conditions, and I'm hoping that there can be some sort of resolution between staff and the applicant regarding the park space. But I note only that, and this is explained in detail in the responsive EIR document also, but we've got a policy in effect, and that I'm not making a value judgment about one way or the other. I'm just talking about compliance, where we are expected to have 6.5 acres of park and recreational space per 1,000 residents. According to even our own response, or I should say the consultant's response, we're at 4.4 acres right now. And this creates a gulf, which will, if my calculations are correct, will be slightly or even moderately increased with our residents coming online over the build out period here, which is projected to be 13,300. Right now we are about, as we stand here today, we're about 171 acres short of actual usable park and recreational space. I understand that there is a report that was done by, or an update that was done by the Parks and Community Commission in 2011 that projected that over their extrapolated build out period, I think of 2035, that we'd be up to that number. Whether or not that number is still a policy in 2035 is subject to speculation, of course, but I'm just speaking about what the standard is today. That was report came out 9 years ago, and here we are 9 years later, and we're still sitting at roughly 4.4 per thousand. So I mention this now because I would, I guess, like it reflected that I don't think that the draft condition, which correctly points out that the applicant can pay a fee, and that's good, but it doesn't even acknowledge that it would be a worthy goal to have a greater mixture of park than, I don't want to say, in place of fees, but I think that increasing open and park space overall would help us get to where we need to be as a city. And I understand, again, this is not necessarily the applicant's issue per se. It's just a situation that we find ourselves in. And I think given the public comments that we've received on this issue, I would be remiss in not acknowledging it as an issue. And as to how we work that in, I'll leave it to the staff and the amendments that are created between now and when we meet again in August. But that is essentially what I had to say about that issue. And I think Lauren might have something to say about it or response to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I want to do is just step back and kind of reframe the discussions that we've had over the past year related to parks space. The general plan build out scenario in 2035 calls for 6.5 per thousand residents. And again, that's the city's commitment to doing it. Under state law, under our own zoning standard, our subdivision standards that deal with park dedications, we can't even require the full 6.5 per thousand. The Quimby Act maxes out at 5 per thousand. So there's, no matter what we do, there's going to be a gap in parks and recreation space that can be conditioned as a result of projects. And so the city becomes the mechanism by which that gap gets closed. It's the city's obligation to meet our own objective. And so under our standards, the applicant is required to pay fees for rental housing. And that's the only requirement they have. And so we would take those fees and utilize those fees to further the goals of parks and recreation and open space. And so again, that's the city's obligation on how to program and make effective use of those fees. Now, the condition itself also speaks to the notion of a development agreement or some other type of an agreement that can be entered into. And I'm not even talking about the questions of whether they get credit for public or privately owned, publicly accessible space. This is purely a placeholder that satisfies the condition unless there's another arrangement that's negotiated and met here. And so it's a difficult thing, and we can acknowledge the fact that we don't have the ratio this day, but based on the build out projections, we'll get there. The other thing that I need to mention is that the build out projection for this project goes beyond 2035. So we're talking about the population added, but we're also talking about, an additional, 13, 14 years, beyond the horizon that we have. And in that time, we will be adopting a new general plan with new goals and new objectives that will adjust for, the build out scenario that's in place for 2040 or even 2050 as we get to it. So I don't know how I think I understand, I can acknowledge the desire to have a tangible addition of parkland, but it's not within the purview of the conditioning of this project to do that. It's a separate question that's subject to how the city wants to allocate those funds and or some other arrangement that could be negotiated for additional improvements, if that's the case. So again, I guess it's a long way of saying, staff believes the condition is adequate to address the requirements, and then we're open to additional discussions as to how we can further the goals of parks and recreation and open space for the community. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
No, I know that I'm wrestling with the practicality of the situation, that I'm trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. I just the condition speaks to an aspiration aspirationally of future agreements with the applicant and the builder to work on some sort of sliding scale between the fees and creation of open space. And I'm not even sure what I'm asking for, other than I wanted to acknowledge the issue, but I did want to make sure that I documented that we are at a deficit. And I know that I'm not blaming anybody for that. There are lots of reasons for that over the years, many of which I'm sure I don't even fully understand. But it is something that we're going to need to wrestle with, not just in this project, but as a policy been handed down to us from our predecessors from years ago.
Yeah.
But thank you for your response.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more point. The general plan actually has an appendices in the parks element that shows how we get there through a combination of existing, proposed, and future parks. And so there's a roadmap for how you get there. And it's just a matter of implementing that and having the resources to implement that. Mm-hmm. So again, I think I saw Mr. Marks raising his hand.
Yeah, he's kind of gone dark.
Yeah.
You didn't see me raising my hand, or if you did, The reason it's gone dark is the battery on the iPad got to below 10%.
Oh.
And I had to move the location of where I was to another location where I can charge while we're talking. And the result is it's gone dead. What happened was I was reaching for something else and I hit the iPad, and I apologize. It looked like I had a question or a comment. I don't, not about
Yeah, I thought you raised your hand, but okay.
No, one of those technical things that I'm good at getting caught up in.
Okay. Well, we're glad you're not in the dark.
I do have a comment about the conditions, but I'll wait until we're finished with this park thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm done with the park thing.
You're done with the park thing? Okay. Why don't we make sure we get to Mr. Marks before he really goes in the dark?
Well, it's just a condition that I would like to see added to the attachment J conditions of approval. It's a condition we've attached to, I believe, one or two other residential projects in the past, and I don't have the exact wording. I would leave the wording up to the staff, but I would like to see that all residential parking structures and new commercial buildings and new supporting at-grade parking lots shall include electric vehicle charging stations. I know that could be considered something that would happen downstream, but I'd like to see it included in this document as well as what might happen in the future, just to make sure that it's out there, applicants see it, and we don't forget about it. And again, the language, I would leave to Debbie and Lauren to figure out how they want to say it.
They were all sort of, banking on the idea that PG&E won't, have too many power shutoffs, and the future of electricity is consistent.
Looking, I don't see any dissent from the commissioners for concurring with Commissioner Marks.
No dissent.
Yeah. Other comments regarding this? Regarding the resolution 11-20? Okay. Other comments at all about tonight? And at this point, seeing none, Lauren, I think what we would like at this point is you're asking for us to make a motion to continue to the public hearing of August the 4th.
Right.
Okay. So if there are no other discussions, could we have a motion, please, to continue to the public hearing of August the 4th, 2020?
I'll move that we continue the hearing on Citywalk to August 4th, 2020.
Yes, you got some nervous glimmers. Okay, may we have a second, please?
I will second it.
Okay, moved and seconded.
Okay, let me go ahead. I'll do a roll call vote here. All right, so we had mover Vice Chair Wallace.
Aye.
We have seconder Commissioner Frank.
Aye.
Commissioner Kuznick.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks.
Aye.
And Chair Alpert.
Aye.
All right, thank you. So the meeting will be continued to August
4th.
August 4th. Yes.
August 4th. Yes. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we can go ahead. We'll just move forward to item 10, public hearing new items, which we have none this evening. Item 11 is non-public hearing action items, which there are none. And item 12 is study session and commissioner liaison report and interest items, staff reports.
Okay.
Do we have any?
I
We
have
probably
one.
do. Okay, so Commissioner Wallace, I think I heard you start.
I just wanted to note that we're going to start hack interviews, Commissioner Marks and I, on Thursday. And then we have another session next week. And then we will be able to forward our recommendations to the full planning commission.
Terrific.
Mr. Chairman, I have a report as well. I sat in for Eric at the Open Space Committee meeting last week, and just two items really. One, the fall hike programming has been indefinitely postponed based on the COVID-19 situation, but key hikes in the future, when opportunities come up, the staff will apprise the committee. So if anyone was thinking that there was already a schedule for those hikes, there isn't at this time. And very interestingly, one of the Parks Commissioners, who is the Parks Commission liaison to the Open Space Committee, raised the question that he would like the committee to take a look at, and that is what can be done to provide trees along the Iron Horse Trail within San Ramon, and to see if the East Bay Regional Parks staff could come, or not come, but could Zoom with the Open Space Committee and explain the situation, see what the constraints are, and offer any light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And so that's something that is on the future agendas of the Open Space Committee.
Okay.
That's it.
That's good.
Okay. I attended an ARB meeting a week or so ago, and it was a review of the renovation of the permit and the planning building and the new construction of the emergency center, and a lot of discussion around the building architecture, the landscape, the design. So they provided a lot of comments to the architect. And then I attended Economic Development Advisory Committee. That was just a get to know you meeting. It was the first inaugural meeting of the new committee and election of officers. And they went over their bylaws, and they didn't accomplish a lot more than that because it was just getting to know each other. So that was what I attended the last couple of weeks. And Lauren, up to you now. Coming attractions.
Okay. We have next week, or excuse me, next meeting, the 4th, is Citywalk, action on the EIR and master plan proposal. On the 6th, excuse me, my eyes are failing. On the 18th, we're coming back with the Crow Canyon specific plan. We are also doing the election of chair and vice chair, as well as hack appointments. And so I'll give you just 2 meetings out at this point. Additionally, we wanted to provide you some updates on past projects, just status of what we're hearing from some of these projects. And if you have questions about any other ones we don't touch on here, please speak up. Regarding the Rome development, the housing project, they've been actively trying to sell the entitlements to a new developer. That new group has been doing their due diligence regarding fees and process. You may recall that the building permits are essentially ready to issue for that project. But they're not going to last indefinitely. They've been approved now for probably almost a year. And so there's some urgency to either make a decision to move forward or potentially do something different with that. Aspenwood, my understanding is they're dealing with some finance issues. I don't know, Debbie, if you want to, you're more in touch with that one than I am, if you have some thoughts.
Yes, so due to COVID, and as we've seen, a lot of the outbreaks have been in the senior care facilities. And so there are precautions that need to be put in place before they can proceed with the project. So they're working through maybe some redesign efforts, and then working through with their loan application with the bank still. So that may be a while out before we'll see them breaking ground.
Okay. Regarding the Hampton Inn Hotel, earlier this year, they got an extension on their entitlements, a 1-year extension. We have been entertaining some questions from them regarding revisions to their parking structure and changing some of the dynamics there. So it's kind of unclear whether they're going to do some redesign of their project and come back, or if they're going to move forward with what they already have. You might recall there was a certain amount of design work that they had to do in terms of streetscape and how the street edge worked. And so we haven't seen anything on that. So it's a question mark right now in terms of the timing of that. Regarding Summit Senior Living, they're actually getting very close to occupancy. I'm not sure it's a great time for occupancy for a senior care facility, but nonetheless, they're getting close. The Church of the Nazarene, the other part of that property, they've actually had temporary occupancy for a while now, but they still have, they're contingent on the Summit Senior Care people getting their final and some shared obligations between them being satisfied. And so once the senior care facility gets temporary occupancy, they can start bringing in staff and setting up the facility, but there's still some obligations prior to final occupancy, public art, and some other things. Trying to think of what else. Debbie, can you think of any others that I'm forgetting?
No, I think those are the main ones for right now.
Any other questions from the commission regarding projects or status of applications?
Lauren, offhand, do you recall what's happening with the El Nido assisted care project?
Yeah, the application's technically incomplete. We've had a series of conversations, and they've actually just resubmitted some materials to us. If you recall, there was some questions about doing a specific plan amendment versus trying to, work within the development standards or just basically change the development standards. And so we're putting together a request for proposal for environmental services and to do some of that specific plan work. So we're probably a little ways out from awarding a contract, but it's moving, but very slowly. But again, we just got information back within the last, I'd say 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Lauren, do you have a sense on how soon Costco gas is going to come before the commission?
It will come before you. It is the application is deemed incomplete at this point. We are waiting on traffic analysis and some additional support documentation. We're just not sure when they're going to submit. It could be next week. It could be a month, but one of the challenges that we're dealing with is that we're on the cusp of standards, the vehicle miles traveled standard versus LOS. So it's making some of the traffic analysis a little more complicated in the sense that we don't have a very clear established method for doing it. CCTA is working on the protocols that will help us pin some of that down. But in the meantime, we're relying on best practice that's not unique to our area. So, and so I know that VMT issue is an issue for Costco, making sure they do the right analysis. So that's all I have for now.
Great, thank you for the update. Any other questions for anybody? Okay, well, gosh, there's nothing else to do except go home, I guess. Well, for those of us that are sort of home,
Yeah.
then we'll just, I guess we can adjourn at 10:09 tonight. Thank you, everybody.